3 days felt like an eternity for the tenants. Each passing moment was filled with nervous anticipation. When the day of the verdict finally arrived, the compound was eerily quiet as everyone gathered under the baobab tree to await the news. But before they could leave for the council building, a loud commotion erupted at the entrance to the compound. Mr. Ton's car screeched to a halt, and he stepped out, flanked by several men. They carried tools and began tearing down parts of the fence surrounding the compound. "What is the meaning of this?" Zainab demanded, rushing forward. Mr. Ton smirked. "I'm making improvements to my property. Isn't that what you wanted?" "Improvements," Yemi said, stepping beside Zainab. "This is intimidation. You're trying to scare us before the verdict." Mr. Ton's smile widened. "You can call it whatever you like. I call it asserting my authority." The tenants watched in dismay as the men continued their work, tearing down parts of the fence and blocking access to the communal well. Children cried, and the elderly looked on helplessly. Yemi's heart ached, but she refused to back down. "We need to go to the council now," Bola said urgently. "They need to see what he's doing." The tenants rallied together and made their way to the council building. When they arrived, Chairman Onifed was informed of the situation. He immediately sent council representatives to the compound to halt Mr. Ton's actions. As the tenants waited for the final verdict, Yemi realized that their fight was about more than rent or repairs. It was about dignity, justice, and the right to live without fear. Whatever the council decided, she knew they had already won something invaluable, their unity. The council building was packed when the tenants arrived. The hearing had drawn the attention of many in Dakuro, and even those without a stake in the outcome had gathered to watch the proceedings. Yemi, Zainab, Bola, and the rest of the tenants sat together, their eyes fixed on Chairman Onifed. The chairman's gavel struck the desk, silencing the murmurs in the room. After careful deliberation, he began, "The council has reached a decision regarding the grievances filed by the tenants of Mr. Ton's compound." Yemi's heart raced as she gripped Tolu's hand. Zainab leaned forward, her breath held. "The council finds that Mr. Ton has violated the ethical standards expected of landlords in Dakuro. His sudden rent increases, neglect of property maintenance, and acts of intimidation are unacceptable. Effective immediately, Mr. Ton is ordered to halt all construction or demolition in the compound, restore access to shared facilities, and provide a detailed explanation for his actions." The room erupted in applause. The tenants hugged one another, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Yemi knelt to embrace Tolu, whispering, "We did it, my love. We did it." Chairman Onifed raised his hand for silence. "Furthermore, Mr. Ton will be required to adjust rent increases to a fair and reasonable level. The council will monitor his compliance closely. Failure to adhere to these measures will result in legal action." Mr. Ton stood, his face flushed with anger. "This is an outrage. These tenants are ungrateful troublemakers." "Sit down, Mr. Ton," Chairman Onifed said firmly. "Your conduct has been noted, and this council will not tolerate further outbursts." As the session adjourned, the tenants left the building victorious. Their battle wasn't over, but they had achieved a significant step toward justice. Back at the compound, the atmosphere was electric. Children played freely, and neighbors shared meals and stories. For the first time in months, the compound felt alive with hope. Yemi and Zainab sat together under the baobab tree, watching Tolu and the other children chase one another. "We've won an important battle," Zainab said, "but there's still work to be done. Mr. Tunde won't change overnight." "No," Yemi agreed, "but we've shown him that we're not afraid to stand up for ourselves." Bola joined them, carrying a tray of roasted plantains. "We need to keep the momentum going. What if we form a tenant association? Something official, so we can protect ourselves in the future." Zainab's eyes lit up. "That's a brilliant idea. If we're organized, landlords like Mr. Tunde will think twice before trying to exploit us." Over the next few weeks, the tenants came together to create the Dakuro Tenants Association. They elected Zainab as president, with Bola as secretary and Yemi as treasurer. The association quickly became a symbol of their unity and resilience. One evening, Yemi returned to her room to find a small envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a handwritten note. "You've won this round, but don't think this is over." Her hands trembled as she read the words, but instead of fear, she felt resolve. She walked to Zainab's room and showed her the note. "We'll handle this together," Zainab said firmly. "He's just trying to scare us again." Yemi nodded. Together, they would face whatever came next. Despite the council's ruling, tensions in the compound remained high. Mr. Tunde had returned to his office but was clearly plotting his next move. Meanwhile, the tenants worked tirelessly to rebuild their community, fixing the damage done during Mr. Tunde's improvements. One afternoon, Bola arrived at the compound with troubling news. "I've heard rumors," he said, gathering the tenants under the baobab tree. "Mr. Tunde is planning to sell the compound to developers. If that happens, they could evict us all." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mama Ade clutched her chest. "Sell the compound? Where would we go?" Yemi felt a pang of fear but quickly pushed it aside. "We can't let that happen. We need to find out if the rumors are true and, if they are, stop the sale." Zainab nodded. "Bola, can you gather more information? We need proof before we take action." Over the next few days, Bola and Yemi visited local government offices and spoke to contacts in the community. Their suspicions were confirmed. Mr. Tunde had indeed begun negotiations with a property developer. The deal wasn't finalized, but it was dangerously close. The tenants reconvened, their determination stronger than ever. "We need to bring this to the council," Zainab said. "But we also need to raise awareness in the community. If we can rally public support, it will be harder for the developers to move forward." The tenants began organizing protests and reaching out to local media. Yemi found herself speaking to reporters, her voice steady as she explained their plight. "This isn't just about us," she said. "It's about protecting families and preserving the heart of Dakuro." As the protest gained traction, support poured in from across the city. The tenants' fight had become a symbol of resistance against exploitation, and they were ready to take on whatever came next. The protest outside the compound grew larger by the day. What began as a small group of tenants quickly expanded into a citywide movement. People from all walks of life, students, traders, and community leaders, joined the cause, carrying signs that read, save our homes, and stop greed. Zainab stood at the forefront, her voice carrying over the crowd. This is not just about one compound. This is about all of us. If we allow greed to destroy our communities, where will we go? Her words ignited the crowd, their chants echoing through the streets of Dakuro. Yemi felt a swell of pride as she watched the unity among the people. Even Tolu, holding a small handmade sign, joined the chants with enthusiasm. The protest drew the attention of city officials, who promised to look into the matter. But behind the scenes, Mr. Tunde was working tirelessly to finalize the sale. His frustration grew as the protest disrupted his plans. "These tenants think they can stop me," he muttered to his lawyer. "But I'll show them who's in charge." As the days passed, tension mounted. Late one evening, a group of men arrived at the compound, claiming to be sent by Mr. Tunde to inspect the property. They began marking walls and measuring the land, their presence unsettling the tenants. "This is intimidation," Zainab said, confronting the men. "You have no right to be here without proper notice." The men ignored her, continuing their work. But instead of cowering, the tenants gathered around them, forming a human barrier. "If you want to do this, you have to go through us," Bola said firmly. The standoff lasted for hours until the men finally left. The tenants cheered, their spirits lifted by their collective strength. But they knew the battle was far from over. The next morning, the tenants received a letter from the city council. It was an invitation to a public hearing, where both the tenants and Mr. Tunde would present their cases regarding the potential sale of the compound. "This is our chance," Yemi said, holding the letter tightly. "If we can prove how much this community means to Dakuro, they might stop the sale." Preparation for the hearing consumed the tenants. They gathered photos, testimonies, and evidence of the compound's cultural and historical significance. Mama Ade shared stories of how the compound had been a refuge for displaced families during past crises. Bola collected statements from local businesses that relied on the tenants as customers. When the day of the hearing arrived, the council hall was packed. The tenants sat together, their heads held high. On the other side of the room, Mr. Tunde and his lawyer exuded confidence, their briefcases filled with documents. The hearing began with Chairman Onifed presiding. "We are here to discuss the potential sale of the compound and its impact on the community. Both sides will have an opportunity to present their case." Zainab spoke first, her voice steady and impassioned. She outlined the tenants' struggles and their efforts to rebuild their community. She emphasized the importance of preserving the compound as a safe and affordable home for families. When it was Mr. Tunde's turn, he painted a picture of progress and economic growth, claiming that the development would benefit Dakuro as a whole. But his words rang hollow against the heartfelt testimonies of the tenants. As the hearing concluded, Chairman Onifed announced that the council would deliver its decision in 1 week. The tenants left the hall feeling a mix of hope and apprehension. The future of their home hung in the balance. During the week leading up to the council's decision, the tenants continued their efforts to rally support. Local artists painted murals depicting the unity of the compound, while musicians performed songs inspired by the tenants' struggle. The movement had become a cultural phenomenon, drawing even more attention to their cause. Yemi found herself at the center of the spotlight, giving interviews and speaking at events. Despite her nerves, she felt empowered by the support of her community. "This is about more than just one compound," she said during a radio interview. "It's about fighting for what's right." Meanwhile, Mr. Tunde faced growing pressure. His reputation had taken a hit, and potential buyers were hesitant to proceed with the deal. Frustrated, he tried to intimidate the tenants once more, but his efforts only strengthened their resolve. On the eve of the council's decision, the tenants gathered under the baobab tree for a vigil. They lit candles and shared stories, their voices filled with hope and determination. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Zainab said, "we've shown that we are strong, and we will not be silenced." The day of the council's decision arrived, and the tension in the compound was palpable. The tenants once again made their way to the council building, their hearts heavy with anticipation. Chairman Onifed addressed the packed hall, his expression serious but calm. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimonies, the council has reached a decision regarding the sale of the compound. The room fell silent as he continued. "The council has decided to deny the sale of the compound to developers. Furthermore, we recommend that the compound be designated as a protected community, ensuring its preservation for future generations." Cheers erupted from the tenants and their supporters. Tears streamed down Yemi's face as she hugged Zainab and Bola. The fight had been long and arduous, but they had emerged victorious. As they left the council building, Yemi looked around at her neighbors, their faces glowing with joy and relief. For the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. The compound was more than just a place to live, it was a symbol of their resilience and unity. The celebration at the compound was unlike anything the tenants had experienced before. People poured in from all corners of Dakuro to congratulate the residents on their hard-fought victory. The once dilapidated compound now felt alive, buzzing with hope and unity. Mama Ade prepared her famous roasted corn, Bola set up a makeshift stage for musicians, and Yemi and Zainab organized games for the children. Even Tolu had a role, handing out small paper flags that read, "Our home, our victory." "This isn't just about us," Zainab said as she addressed the crowd that evening. "This is about every community in Dakuro. Together, we've shown that unity and determination can overcome greed and exploitation." Cheers erupted, and as music filled the air, Yemi stood back, watching her neighbors laugh and dance. For the first time, she felt a sense of belonging that went beyond the walls of her small room. They weren't just tenants anymore, they were a family. But even as they celebrated, Yemi knew their journey wasn't over. The designation of the compound as a protected community was a huge step, but maintaining that status would require vigilance and continued effort. She vowed to stay involved, determined to protect what they had built together. As the weeks passed, life in the compound began to return to normal. Repairs were finally underway, with volunteers from the community helping to fix leaking roofs and repaint walls. The Dakuro Tenants Association met regularly, discussing plans to improve the compound and ensure its long-term sustainability. But not everyone was happy about the outcome. Mr. Tunde's presence loomed like a shadow. Though he had been forced to halt his plans, he was still the legal owner of the property, and his resentment toward the tenants was palpable. One afternoon, Zainab received an unsettling visit. Mr. Tunde's lawyer arrived unannounced, delivering a letter. It was a formal notice stating that Mr. Tunde intended to challenge the council's decision in court. "He's not giving up," Zainab said, gathering the tenants under the baobab tree to share the news. "We need to prepare for another fight. How can he still do this after everything?" Yemi asked, her frustration evident. "Because he has resources we don't," Bola replied. "But that doesn't mean we'll back down." The tenants agreed to launch a legal defense, reaching out to lawyers who had supported their cause during the protest. They also began raising funds, organizing community events and reaching out to allies across Dakuro. The fight was far from over, but their resolve remained unshaken. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the tenants once again found themselves facing off against Mr. Tunde. This time, the setting was a courtroom, where the stakes felt even higher. The tenant's lawyer, Mrs. Okoro, was a sharp and experienced advocate who had volunteered to take on their case pro bono. "Remember," she said to the group before the hearing began, "this isn't just about legalities. It's about showing the judge the human impact of this fight." Mr. Tunde's lawyer argued that the council's decision was unfair and that the designation of the compound as a protected community infringed on Mr. Tunde's property rights. He painted a picture of progress being stifled by sentimental resistance. But Mrs. Okoro countered with evidence of Mr. Tunde's negligence and exploitation. She presented photos, testimonies, and even financial records that showed how his actions had harmed the tenants and the community. Yemi was called to testify. As she stood before the judge, she spoke from her heart. "This compound isn't just a place to live. It's a home, a community, and a part of Dakuro's history. We fought hard to protect it because we believe in its value, not just for us but for generations to come." Her words seemed to resonate, and as the hearing concluded, the judge announced that a decision would be delivered in 2 weeks. The tenants left the courtroom with a mix of hope and anxiety, knowing they had done everything they could. Back at the compound, Yemi looked at Tolu, who was playing with other children. She whispered to herself, "No matter what happens, we'll keep fighting." 2 weeks felt like an eternity. The tenants kept themselves busy with activities, but the looming decision was never far from their minds. When the day finally arrived, they once again packed the courtroom, holding their breaths as the judge prepared to speak. After reviewing all evidence presented, the judge began, "I have come to a conclusion. While property rights are important, so too is the well-being of the people who inhabit that property. The designation of the compound as a protected community stands. Furthermore, Mr. Tunde's repeated attempts to undermine this ruling are unacceptable. This court orders Mr. Tunde to cease all further challenges." Cheers erupted from the tenants and their supporters. Relief washed over Yemi as she hugged Zainab and Bola. Tolu clapped enthusiastically, his joy uncontainable. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed to capture the tenants' reactions. Yemi, now accustomed to speaking publicly, stepped forward. "This victory belongs to all of us," she said. "It's proof that when we stand together, we can achieve the impossible." With the legal battle behind them, the tenants turned their attention to rebuilding. They used the funds raised during the protests to create a community garden, repair the playground, and repaint the compound walls. Local artists volunteered to create murals celebrating their journey, turning the compound into a vibrant, welcoming space. The Dakuro Tenants Association continued to grow, attracting members from other parts of the city who wanted to learn from their success. Monthly meetings were filled with discussions about future projects, and the sense of unity only deepened. Yemi started a literacy program for the children in the compound, using her experiences to inspire them. Tolu became her biggest helper, proudly teaching younger kids how to read and write. Mr. Ton's defeat left him bitter, but he eventually decided to sell the property to the Tenants Association at a fair price. The news was met with cautious optimism. It meant freedom from his grasp, but it also meant a new set of responsibilities. The tenants worked tirelessly to raise the money, partnering with local organizations and crowdfunding their cause. When they finally secured the funds, the day of the purchase became a citywide celebration. The compound now belonged to its residents. The compound's transformation became a model for other communities in Dakuro. The tenants were invited to share their story at schools and community centers, inspiring others to fight for their rights. Yemi often spoke at these events, her confidence growing with each appearance. "Our story shows that we don't have to accept injustice," she said at one gathering. "Together, we can create something better." One evening, Yemi stood under the baobab tree, watching Tolu and the other children play. Zainab joined her, a satisfied smile on her face. "We've come a long way," Zainab said. "And it all started here," Yemi replied, looking up at the tree that had witnessed so much of their journey. As the sun set over Dakuro, the compound stood as a testament to the power of unity, resilience, and hope. It was more than a place to live, it was a home, a community, and a legacy that would endure for generations.
Thank you for staying with us till the end of this incredible story of courage and unity. Yemi, Zainab, and the tenants of Dakuro have shown us the power of standing together against all odds. If you loved this journey, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with others who need a dose of inspiration. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay inspired and keep believing in the power of unity.